The champagne glass shattered on the marble floor as the billionaire froze, his face, drained of color, staring at the trembling waitress who had just spoken the words he never expected to hear. In a room filled with power money and laughter, everything went silent. She wasn't begging. She wasn't accusing him. She was simply telling the truth, a truth that threatened to destroy the life he had spent 25 years building. What he didn't know yet was that this wasn't just an awkward interruption by a server. It was the moment his past caught up with him, carrying a secret that would expose his greatest mistake, challenge his identity, and force him to face a daughter he never knew existed. "Excuse me, sir." The young waitress's voice trembled slightly as she approached the table where the billionaire sat, his custom Armani suit probably costing more than her entire year's salary. He didn't look up from his phone. The glow illuminated the distinctive tattoo on his wrist. An intricate compass rose with a date underneath. June 14th, 2000. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding so loud she was sure the entire restaurant could hear it. "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I noticed your tattoo." His steel grey eyes finally met hers, cold and dismissive. "And my mother." Her voice cracked. "My mother has the exact same one. Same design, same date. She got it when she was in college." The billionaire's face turned to stone, his jaw clenched. The room suddenly felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. "What did you just say?" His voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the ambient noise like a knife. The waitress's hands shook as she held her serving tray. The tattoo. "My mum. Her name is Elena Carter. She said she got it with someone she loved at Columbia University, but he disappeared." And the champagne flute slipped from the billionaire's hand, shattering against the floor in an explosion of glass and golden liquid. Every head in the restaurant turned. "That's impossible." He breathed, his face now drained of all color. Elena had a miscarriage, she told me. 2 years ago, she told me. The waitress's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I'm 25 years old. If you want to know how a simple tattoo unveiled a secret that shattered a billionaire's entire world and revealed a daughter he never knew existed, don't go anywhere. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Where are you watching? And what's the time over there? I would like to connect better with you all. Support us to make this story go viral. Like, share and subscribe, and hit that notification bell, because what happens next will leave you speechless. This is a story about love loss and the truth that changes everything. 4 hours earlier, Sophie Carter's alarm clock screamed at 4:30 a.m., the same way it had every morning for the past 3 years. She slapped it silent and stared at the water-stained ceiling of her studio apartment in Washington Heights, a far cry from the glittering towers of Manhattan where she'd be serving dinner tonight. In the next room, separated only by a thin curtain she'd hung for privacy, her mother coughed, that deep, rattling cough that had been getting worse for months. "Mum, you okay?" Sophie called out, already knowing the answer. "I'm fine, baby." Elena's weak voice drifted back. "You're going to be late." Sophie pulled on her waitress uniform, a black dress she'd carefully hand-washed the night before, because the laundromat cost $8 she didn't have to spare. She looked at herself in the cracked bathroom mirror. 25 years old, and she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hands rough from double shifts. But she forced a smile anyway. For Mum, she thought. Everything is for Mum. She tiptoed to her mother's makeshift bedroom. Elena lay there thin as paper, her once vibrant auburn hair now strewn with premature grey. But even in sickness, even in poverty, her mother was beautiful. "You working the Azure room tonight?" Elena asked, her eyes lighting up slightly. "Yeah, big private event. Wall Street types celebrating some merger. Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, taking her mother's frail hand. Tips should be good. Elena's eyes drifted to the window, where the first hints of dawn painted the sky. You know, I used to dream about places like that before. She trailed off her fingers, absently tracing the faded tattoo on her wrist. Sophie had seen that tattoo her entire life. The compass rose with the date beneath it. She'd asked about it 1,000 times growing up. It's from when I was young and foolish, her mother would always say, with a sad smile. From when I believed in fairy tales. Mom, you need to see a doctor. That cough. Doctors cost money. We don't have, Sophie. Elena squeezed her daughter's hand. The medical bills from last year nearly buried us. I just need rest. But Sophie knew better. Her mother needed treatment. Real treatment, the kind that required insurance they couldn't afford, and medications that cost hundreds of dollars. The math was brutal and simple. Sophie made $15 an hour, plus tips, working 70 hours a week between the Azure room and her morning shift at a diner in Queens. Rent was $1,400. Utilities, food, her mother's basic medications. It all added up to barely surviving, let alone saving for the cancer screening her mother desperately needed. Sophie had dropped out of community college 2 years ago when her mother got sick. The dream of finishing her degree and becoming a teacher felt like a luxury from another lifetime. I'll pick up extra shifts, Sophie said, kissing her mother's forehead. Maybe I can. No. Elena's voice turned firm the way it used to when Sophie was a child. You're already working yourself to death. I won't let you sacrifice any more for me. Too late, Sophie thought. I'd sacrifice everything. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander Hunt stood in his corner office on the 47th floor of Hunt Financial Tower, surveying Manhattan like a king overlooking his kingdom. At 45, he built an empire worth $8.7 billion, real estate tech investments venture capital. His Midas touch was legendary on Wall Street. But standing there in his $5,000 suit, looking at the city that had given him everything, Alexander felt hollow. Your car is ready, sir. His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. The Azure Room event starts at 7:00 p.m. Thank you, Patricia. He straightened his cufflinks, catching sight of the tattoo on his wrist. He usually kept it covered, but today he'd rolled up his sleeves in the privacy of his office. June 14th, 2000. 25 years ago, Columbia University. Alina. He'd spent 2.5 decades trying to forget her, building his fortune, marrying twice, both marriages ending in expensive divorces, drowning himself in work and success. But that tattoo, that damn tattoo, was a permanent reminder of the only time in his life he'd truly been happy. They'd been so young, so stupidly, recklessly in love. They'd gotten the matching tattoos on their 6-month anniversary, swearing they'd be together forever. Then everything fell apart. Elena had gotten pregnant. They were both 20 broke college students with dreams bigger than their reality. Alexander had panicked. His father, the original Hunt patriarch, had threatened to disown him, cut him off completely if he didn't handle it. So he'd done the unforgivable. He'd given Elena money for an abortion and told her they were too young, that it wasn't the right time, that they'd have children later when they were ready. She'd taken the money. Then she'd disappeared. 2 weeks later, she called him crying, saying she'd miscarried. The guilt and grief had nearly destroyed him. By the time he tried to find her to apologize to make things right, she was gone. Changed her number. Left school, vanished. He'd spent months looking for her then, years. Then eventually he'd forced himself to stop, to move on, to bury that pain under layers of success and wealth. Elena, he thought, staring at the tattoo. I'm so sorry. He had everything now. Money, power, respect. But he'd trade it all for one more day with the girl who'd loved him before he became Alexander Hunt, the billionaire. Back when he was just Alex, the scholarship kid from Brooklyn, with big dreams. His phone buzzed, a text from his driver. Downstairs waiting Mr. Hunt. Alexander grabbed his jacket and headed for the elevator. Tonight was the Meridian Capital merger celebration. $400 million deal he just closed. Another trophy for his collection. He had no idea that in a few hours his entire world would shatter. The azure room buzzed with the energy of old money and new fortunes colliding. Sophie weaved through the crowd, balancing a tray of horse, her feet already aching in the required heels. Around her, men in suits that cost more than her annual rent laughed too loudly, their voices lubricated by $300 bottles of wine. Miss another Scotch top shelf? And make it quick. A red-faced executive barked at her without even looking up from his conversation. Right away, sir. Sophie smiled through gritted teeth. She'd learned early that invisible was the best way to be in places like this. Rich people didn't see servers as human beings, just moving furniture that occasionally brought them things. She delivered the scotch, accepted zero thanks, and returned to her station near the kitchen. Her supervisor, a perpetually stressed woman named Carol, grabbed her arm. Sophie, we need you on VIP section, corner booth. That's Alexander Hunt's table. Sophie's stomach dropped. She'd heard the name whispered all night with reverence and fear. Alexander Hunt, the Alexander Hunt billionaire, philanthropist shark. I usually handle the main floor. Our senior server called in sick. You're good with difficult customers. Just smile, be invisible, and for God's sake, don't spill anything. Carol pushed her toward the velvet ropes that separated the VIP section from everyone else. Sophie took a deep breath and stepped into another world. The corner booth was positioned to overlook the entire restaurant and the glittering Manhattan skyline beyond. 3 men sat there, but her eyes immediately locked on the one in the middle. Alexander Hunt was impossibly handsome in that intimidating way. Powerful men often were. Sharp jawline silver threading through his dark hair eyes that seemed to calculate the worth of everything they landed on. He radiated authority, the kind that came from never hearing the word no. Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Sophie, and I'll be champagne. Dom Perrin, 2008. 3 glasses. Alexander didn't look at her. His attention fixed on the contract papers spread across the table. Of course, sir. Sophie's voice came out smaller than she intended. As she turned to leave, one of the other men, younger, cruel-looking, called out, "Hey, sweetheart, you know how much money is on this table right now?" Sophie stopped, unsure if she was supposed to answer. $400 million, the man continued, grinning. That's probably more money than everyone you know will make in their entire lives combined. Crazy, right? His companion laughed. Brandon, leave the girl alone. But Brandon wasn't done. I'm just saying it's good to keep perspective. Some people make billions. Some people pour champagne. That's just how the world works. Sophie felt her face burn with humiliation, but she kept her professional smile plastered on. I'll get your champagne right away. She escaped to the bar, her hands shaking as she relayed the order. The bartender, an older man named Morris, who'd always been kind to her, gave her a sympathetic look. Hunt's table. How'd you know Brandon Marsh is a notorious ass? And Hunt? Maurice poured the champagne carefully. Hunt's different. Cold. They say he's brilliant, but ruthless. Built his fortune by never letting emotions get in the way of profit. Sophie thought of her mother at home, probably still awake despite needing rest, probably worrying about bills they couldn't pay. Men like Alexander Hunt lived in a universe so far removed from her reality, they might as well be different species. She delivered the champagne without incident, grateful when they ignored her completely. For the next hour, she served their table in silence, refilling drinks, clearing plates existing as background noise to their important conversations about mergers and markets and millions. Then Alexander Hunt rolled up his sleeve. Sophie was clearing away dessert plates when she saw it. The tattoo on his wrist partially visible beneath his PC Philippe watch. Her breath caught in her throat. No, it can't be. The compass rose the intricate detail, the date underneath. It was identical to her mother's. Sophie's mind raced. Her mother never talked about the father. Never. When Sophie was young and asked, Alina would get a distant look in her eyes and say, "He was someone I loved once, but life took us different directions." As Sophie got older and pushed harder, her mother finally admitted he was at Collier. We got matching tattoos. I got pregnant. He didn't want it, gave me money and told me to take care of it. I couldn't do it, Sophie. I couldn't. But I also couldn't tell him. So I told him I'd miscarried. And then I left. I couldn't stay in a city where I might run into him, where he might find out I'd lied. Sophie had been furious. You should have made him pay child support. We've been struggling my entire life. But Elena had shaken her head. I made my choice. I chose you. And I've never regretted it for a single second. Now, staring at that tattoo, Sophie felt the world tilt on its axis. June 14th, 2000. The same date, the exact same tattoo. Her mother had been at Columbia. This man would have been there 25 years ago. He was the right age. The timeline matched perfectly. Sophie's heart hammered against her ribcage. This couldn't be coincidence, could it? She thought of her mother, lying in that apartment, sick and getting sicker, unable to afford the treatment that might save her life. She thought of all the nights she'd gone to bed hungry, so her mom could eat. All the dreams she'd given up, all the years of struggling and scraping by. And this man, this billionaire who spent more on a single bottle of champagne than Sophie made in a month, might be the reason for all of it. Rage bubbled up in her chest, hot and overwhelming, but beneath it was something else, something desperate. What if he's my father? What if he could help Mum? Sophie knew she should walk away. Keep quiet. What were the odds, really? Lots of people had tattoos. It was probably nothing. But her mother's cough echoed in her memory. The medical bills stacked on their kitchen counter. The weight of watching the person she loved most in the world slowly dying because they couldn't afford basic health care. She had to know. Sophie approached the table, her legs feeling like they might give out beneath her. The men were laughing about something. Cigars now lit despite the no-smoking policy that apparently didn't apply to billionaires. "Excuse me, sir." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Alexander didn't respond, still focused on his phone. "Sir," she tried again, louder this time. He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Yes." Sophie swallowed hard. "Point of no return. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I noticed your tattoo." The table went quiet. Brandon smirked. "Oh, this should be good. You getting hit on by the help, Alex?" But Alexander's expression had changed. He looked down at his wrist, then back at Sophie, with those calculating eyes. "What about it?" "My mother!" Sophie's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. "My mother has the exact same one. Same design, same date. She got it when she was in college." The color drained from Alexander's face. His eyes went wide, then narrow, then wide again. A rapid succession of emotions Sophie couldn't read. "What did you just say?" The words came out slowly, dangerously quiet. Sophie's hands shook as she held her serving tray. "The tattoo, my mum. Her name is Elena Carter. She said she got it with someone she loved at Columbia University, but he disappeared." And the champagne flute slipped from Alexander's hand. The crash echoed through the entire restaurant like a gunshot. Glass exploded across a marble. Golden liquid spread in a widening pool. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. But Sophie only saw Alexander's face, watching it cycle through shock, disbelief, pain, and something that looked almost like hope. "That's impossible," he breathed, his voice breaking. Elena had a miscarriage, she told me. 25 years ago, she told me. Sophie felt tears burning in her eyes. "Sir, I'm 25 years old." The silence that followed was deafening. Brandon leaned back, his eyes going wide. Holy Alexander stood up so fast, his chair toppled backward. He grabbed Sophie's arm, not hard, but desperate. "What's your name, Sophie?" "Sophie Carter, Elena Carter's daughter." He said it like he was testing the words, seeing if they could possibly be real. Elena had a daughter. Elena had a... His leg seemed to give out. He sat back down heavily, staring at Sophie like she was a ghost. "I need..." He couldn't seem to form complete sentences. "How is she? Where is she?" "I looked for her after graduation. I looked everywhere. She's sick." The words burst out of Sophie before she could stop them. "She's really sick and we can't afford the treatment. And I work 70 hours a week, but it's never enough, and she's dying, and I don't know what to do." Sophie's professional composure shattered. Tears streamed down her face. All the exhaustion, all the fear, all the rage of the last 2 years came pouring out. Alexander stood again, his hand reaching toward her, but stopping short. "What's wrong with her? What does she need?" "Tests, scans. The doctor thinks it might be cancer, but we can't afford the screening. Our insurance. We don't have insurance. We can barely afford rent. I'll pay for it." The words came out fast and firm, all of it. Whatever she needs. The best doctors. The best. Why Sophie's voice turned sharp through her tears. Because you feel guilty. Because you realize you might have a daughter you abandoned 25 years ago. The VIP section had become a theater, with every guest and server watching the drama unfold. Alexander flinched like she'd slapped him. "I didn't abandon. She told me she miscarried. She told me you were gone. If I had known, would you have cared?" Sophie shot back. "My mum said you gave her money to get rid of me that you didn't want. I was 20 years old and terrified." Alexander's voice rose, drawing even more attention. "My father threatened to disown me. I panicked. I made the worst decision of my life, and I have regretted it every single day since. Every single day." He looked at her with such raw pain that Sophie took a step back. "I looked for her." Alexander continued, his voice dropping. "When she said she lost the baby, I was devastated. And I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. So I looked for her for months, but she disappeared. Changed her number, left school, gone. She left New York," Sophie whispered. "Moved to Philadelphia, worked 3 jobs while pregnant with me. Then we came back here when I was 10, because she thought enough time had passed that she wouldn't run into you." Alexander's jaw clenched. 25 years. You've been in this city for 15 years, and I never knew. Elena never told me. I have a daughter, and I never knew. You have a maybe daughter, Brandon interjected, trying to sound reasonable. Alex, come on. This could be a scam. You're a billionaire. You think this is the first time someone's tried to utter's voice was ice. He looked at Sophie. You said your mother is sick. Sophie nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Give me the address. I'm coming with you right now. What? No. I'm working. I can't just. You're done working for tonight. Alexander pulled out his wallet and handed Carol, who'd materialized at the edge of the scene, 5 $100 bills for her time. Carol stammered, Mr. Hunt, that's really not. Keep it. He turned back to Sophie. Please, I need to see her. I need to know if he couldn't finish the sentence. Sophie's mind spun. This was insane. This morning she'd woken up in her tiny apartment, and now a billionaire who might be her father wanted to come home with her to see her dying mother. But looking at his face, at the desperate hope and fear warring in his eyes, she saw something real, something human, beneath the expensive suit and cold reputation. "Washington Heights," Sophie heard herself say. "But I'm warning you, it's not like this." She gestured at the opulent restaurant. "It's small and cramped, and I don't care." Alexander was already moving toward the exit. "Let's go." As they left the azure room together, Sophie caught sight of their reflection in the glass doors. A billionaire in a $5,000 suit and a waitress in a polyester uniform walking side by side into the night. And somewhere in the city, Elena Carter was about to face the ghost of her past. The ride to Washington Heights was suffocating in its silence. Alexander's driver had pulled up in a black Mercedes S-Class that probably cost more than Sophie's entire building. She'd hesitated at the door, suddenly hyper-aware of her cheap uniform, her scuffed shoes, the smell of kitchen grease that clung to her hair. "Get in," Alexander had said softly, and she did. Now they sat in the back seat, as the city lights blurred past, neither speaking. Sophie kept her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. Alexander stared out the window, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle twitching. Finally, as they crossed into her neighborhood, he spoke. "What's she like, Elena? What's she like now?" Sophie turned to look at him. In the dim light of the car, he looked younger, vulnerable. "She's strong, stronger than anyone I've ever known. She worked 3 jobs when I was little. Made sure I never went hungry, even when she did. She taught me to read before I started school. Helped me with homework even after 12-hour shifts." Sophie's voice softened. "She's the best person I know." Alexander's throat worked. She was like that back then, too. Brilliant kind. She used to tutor other students for free just because she wanted to help. I was failing economics before I met her. She spent hours teaching me, never making me feel stupid. He paused. "I loved her. I really loved her, but not enough." Sophie said quietly. "No." The word was barely audible. Not enough. The car pulled up to Sophie's building, a 5-story walk-up with peeling paint and a broken intercom. Alexander stared up at it, and Sophie watched something shift in his expression. Not disgust, something worse. Guilt. "5th floor," Sophie said, opening the door. "There's no elevator. I don't care." They climbed in silence, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell that smelled of cooking oil and old carpet. On the 3rd-floor landing, they passed Mrs. Rodriguez, struggling with grocery bags. Sophie automatically moved to help. "Garcia's mija." Mrs. Rodriguez puffed, eyeing Alexander with open curiosity. "Who's your friend?" "Just someone from work," Sophie managed. By the time they reached the 5th floor, Alexander was breathing harder than he probably had in years. Sophie fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so badly she dropped them. Alexander bent to pick them up, their fingers brushing as he handed them back. "Sophie," he said, "before we go in, I need you to know whatever happens in there. Whatever your mother says, I want to help. Medical bills, treatment, whatever she needs that's not contingent on anything. Do you understand?" Sophie met his eyes. "Why if she lied to you? If I'm not actually because I failed her, once I won't do it again." His voice was steel. And because no one should have to watch someone they love die because they can't afford health care. "That's not right." Sophie nodded, not trusting her voice, and opened the door. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it, cramped, dim, the air thick with the sound of her mother's breathing. Eleanor was still in bed, a book open on her lap, but Sophie could tell she'd been sleeping. "Mum," Sophie called softly. Sophie. Eleanor's voice was groggy. You're home early. Is everything... She stopped mid-sentence as Alexander stepped into view behind Sophie. The book fell from Eleanor's hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Her face went white as paper, then flushed red, then white again. She tried to sit up her hands, clutching the thin blanket like it might shield her. No, she whispered. No, this isn't. You can't be Elena. Alexander's voice broke on her name. He took a step forward, then stopped, looking lost. It's really you. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Two people who'd loved each other a lifetime ago, separated by 25 years, and an ocean of regret. Elena looked so different from the girl Alexander remembered. Thin where she'd been, curvy grey where she'd been vibrant auburn, tired in a way that went bone deep. But her eyes, those green eyes that used to light up when she laughed, those were the same. How did you... Eleanor couldn't finish the sentence. Her gaze shifted to Sophie, standing frozen between them. Understanding dawned across her face. Oh God, Sophie, what did you do? I saw his tattoo, Mum. Sophie's voice trembled. The same one as yours. I had to. You had no right. Elena's voice cracked with emotion. Anger, fear, something desperate. You had no right to bring him here. Mrs. Carter, Alexander started, then corrected himself. Elena, please, I just want to talk. Talk? Elena laughed, a bitter sound that turned into a cough. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to catch her breath. What could we possibly have to talk about after 25 years? How about the fact that you told me you miscarried when you were actually pregnant? Alexander's voice rose despite himself. How about the fact that I might have a daughter and you never told me? Might Elena's eyes flashed. You think I'd let just anyone with a matching tattoo into my home? You think this is some kind of scam? I don't know what to think. Alexander ran his hands through his hair, frustration and confusion pouring out. You disappeared, Elena. You told me our baby was gone, and then you vanished. What was I supposed to believe? You were supposed to respect my choice. Elena tried to stand, but swayed dangerously. Sophie rushed to her side, helping her sit back down. You made it very clear what you wanted, Alex. You handed me money and told me to take care of it, so I did. I took care of it. I took care of her. She gestured at Sophie alone. Because you lied to me. Alexander's voice was raw now. If you told me the truth, what you would have played, happy family. Elena's laugh was harsh. Your father threatened to disown you. You were terrified of losing your inheritance. You think I wanted to trap you, force you to resent me and our child for ruining your precious future. That's not fair. Fair Elena's voice rose stronger than Sophie had heard it in months. You want to talk about fair? I was alone and pregnant at 20 years old. I worked in a diner until I was 8 months pregnant. I lived in a basement apartment with rats. I gave birth in a county hospital and had to argue with them to let me stay an extra day because I had nowhere else to go. Tears streamed down her face. I have spent 25 years doing everything to give Sophie a good life. So don't you dare come into my home and talk to me about fair. The apartment fell silent, except for Elena's ragged breathing and the distant sound of sirens outside. Sophie stood between them, tears running down her own face. Stop, both of you, just stop. She turned to her mother. Mum, you're sick. You need help, real help, the kind we can't afford. Then to Alexander. And you, I don't care if you're my biological father or not. She raised me. She's been there for every scraped knee, every bad dream, every single moment of my life. You don't get to judge her choices. Alexander's shoulders slumped. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. You're right. I'm sorry. He looked at Eleanor. I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to demand anything. I need to know. Is she mine? Eleanor closed her eyes, and for a moment Sophie thought she wouldn't answer. Then so quietly they almost didn't hear. Yes. The word hung in the air like a grenade. She's yours, Elena continued, opening her eyes. Sophie is your daughter. I knew the moment I saw her. She has your eyes, your stubborn chin. As she got older, it became even more obvious. But I never told her who you were. I never spoke your full name. I wanted to protect her from this. Alexander sank into the only chair in the room, a rickety wooden thing that creaked under his weight. He put his head in his hands. 25 years. I've had a daughter for 25 years. Sophie felt like she was watching the scene from outside her body. This billionaire, this stranger, was her father. The father she'd imagined 1,000 different ways growing up. Sometimes she'd pretended he was dead, a tragic hero. Sometimes she'd imagined he was out there searching for them. Never had she imagined this. I don't expect anything from you, Elena said, her voice steadier now. I made my choices. Sophie is an adult. You don't owe us. Don't. Alexander looked up and his eyes were red. Don't tell me what I owe. I've missed everything. First steps, first words, first day of school, birthdays. Christmas is everything. His voice broke. I can't get that back, but I can. He stopped, looking at Sophie. What do you want? What do you need? Sophie laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. What do I want? I want my mum to not be dying. I want to not work 70 hours a week and still not have enough money for groceries. I want to finish my degree. I want. She trailed off. It doesn't matter what I want. It matters to me, Alexander said fiercely. Tell me, please. Sophie looked at her mother, who nodded weakly. Mount Sinai has a specialist, Sophie said quietly. Oncologist. Dr. Reeves. Her office told us the consultation alone is $2,500. We'd need comprehensive scans, which are another $8,000. Then treatment, if it's what we think it is, could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. She laughed bitterly. So yeah, that's what I want. An impossible amount of money to save my mum's life. Alexander pulled out his phone. What's the doctor's name again? What are you doing? Elena asked. Dr. Reeves, Mount C. He was already typing. My assistant can get you an appointment this week. Tomorrow, if possible. We can't afford. I'm paying Alexander. Said simply. For all of it. Treatment, medication, whatever it takes. No. Elena shook her head. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. Alexander looked at her steadily. It's 25 years of child support I should have been paying. It's health care that should have been covered. He swallowed hard. It's the least I can do. Please let me do this. Elena and Sophie looked at each other, having one of those wordless conversations only mothers and daughters could have. Finally, Elena nodded. Okay. Alexander's fingers flew across his phone. My assistant will call you first thing in the morning. You'll see Dr. Reeves tomorrow afternoon. I'll have a car pick you both up. Just like that, Sophie whispered. You just snap your fingers and solve everything. Not everything, Alexander said quietly. Money can't fix what I've broken. It can't give me back 25 years, but it can do this. He stood looking uncomfortable in the small space. I should go. This is a lot for all of us. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Sophie Wood, could I get your number? Just so we can, I don't know, maybe talk sometime. Sophie pulled out her cracked phone, and they exchanged numbers in awkward silence. At the door, Alexander turned back one more time. Elena, I'm sorry for everything. For being a coward, for not fighting harder to find you. for his voice broke for all of it. Elena's expression softened slightly. We were kids, Alex. We both made mistakes. Yeah, but my mistakes cost you 25 years of struggle. That's not the same. After he left, Sophie and Eleanor sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Sophie spoke. Is this real? Did that actually just happen? Eleanor reached for her daughter's hand. I think so. I think your life just changed, baby girl. Our lives, Sophie corrected. You're going to get treatment. You're going to get better. But even as she said it, Sophie couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. That inviting Alexander Hunt into their lives had opened a door that couldn't be closed. Outside, 5 floors below, Alexander sat in his car and didn't give the driver an address. He just stared at the building at the 5th floor window, where a light still burned. He had a daughter. He pulled out his phone and looked at Sophie's contact information. Then, without letting himself overthink it, he sent a text. Thank you for telling me. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but if you're willing, I'd like to try to be part of your life. No pressure. Just think about it, Alex. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then I don't know what to think or feel right now, but Mum's going to get better. That's what matters. We can figure out the rest later. Alexander smiled through tears. He didn't know he was crying. Yeah, we can figure out the rest later. This story is about to take a turn that no one saw coming. A billionaire who thought he'd lost everything is about to discover what really matters. A mother who sacrificed everything is finally getting the help she desperately needs. And a daughter caught in between is about to learn that family isn't always simple, but it might just be worth fighting for. Don't miss what happens next. 3 days later, Sophie stood in the marble lobby of Mount Sinai Hospital, feeling like she'd stepped into a different universe. Everything gleamed. Polished floors, modern art on the walls, people in expensive clothes, moving with purpose and confidence. Miss Carter, a woman in a crisp blazer, approached with a tablet. I'm Jennifer Dr. Reeves, patient coordinator. Your mother is just finishing up her consultation. If you'll follow me. Sophie followed her through a maze of hallways, past waiting rooms that looked more like boutique hotel lounges than hospital spaces. This wasn't the crowded county clinic where they tried to get help before, where you waited 4 hours just to be told they couldn't see you without insurance. Jennifer led her to a private consultation room where Elena sat across from Dr. Reeves, a kind-faced woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes. Ah, Sophie, please sit. Dr. Reeves gestured to the chair next to her mother. I was just explaining to your mother what we found. Sophie's heart plummeted. The expression on her mother's face was unreadable. Somewhere between shock and relief and fear all mixed together. What is it? Sophie grabbed Elena's hand. Mom, it's not cancer, Elena said, and her voice cracked on the words. Sophie felt the world tilt. What Dr. Reeves pulled up scans on her computer screen. Your mother has severe chronic bronchitis and early-stage pneumonia complicated by malnutrition and extreme stress. It's serious, but it's treatable. With proper medication, rest, and nutrition, she should make a full recovery within 3 to 6 months. Sophie stared at the doctor, then at her mother, then back at the doctor. But the symptoms, the coughing, the weight loss, the fatigue, all consistent with what she has, Dr. Reeves explained gently. I understand you were concerned about cancer, and given the symptoms, that was a reasonable fear. But the comprehensive scans show no tumors, no masses. What your mother needs is antibiotics, an inhaler, proper nutrition, and most importantly, rest. Tears streamed down Sophie's face. She's going to be okay. She's going to be fine. Dr. Reeves smiled. Though I have to say, Mrs. Carter, you've been pushing yourself far too hard for far too long. Your body is exhausted. If you'd continued without treatment, she let the implication hang in the air. Elena was crying too now, covering her face with her hands. I thought I was dying. I thought I was going to leave Sophie alone. Sophie threw her arms around her mother, both of them sobbing with relief. For 2 years they'd lived under the shadow of this fear. And now, in one afternoon, everything had changed. I'm prescribing a comprehensive treatment plan. Dr. Reeves continued pulling up documents on her tablet. Medications which Mr. Hunt has already arranged to have delivered to your home, nutritional supplements, and I'm recommending at least 8 weeks of medical leave from work. No exceptions. I can't take 8 weeks off, Elena protested weakly. My job is already handled, came a voice from the doorway. They all turned to see Alexander standing there, in a charcoal suit, looking out of place, and perfectly at home all at once. What are you doing here? Sophie asked. Jennifer called me when the consultation finished. He stepped into the room, nodding respectfully at Dr. Reeves. I wanted to hear the results myself. If that's okay. Elena wiped her eyes. It's fine. Alexander's expression transformed when he heard. It's not cancer. It's not cancer, Elena confirmed, laughing and crying at the same time. Something in Alexander's face cracked open. Relief so profound it was almost painful to witness. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Thank God. Thank God. Dr. Reeves stood. I'll give you all some privacy. Sophie Eleanor, my office will email you all the information. If you have any questions, day or night, you have my direct number. She paused at the door. Mrs. Carter, you're a fighter, but you don't have to fight alone anymore. After she left, the three of them sat in awkward silence. Finally, Alexander spoke. You said something about your job. Elena sighed. I work in a laundromat in Queens. Have been for 8 years. If I take 2 months off, I'll lose it. And we need. You're not going back there, Alexander said quietly. Excuse me, Elena. You nearly died because you couldn't afford to take care of yourself. You're not going back to a job that barely pays minimum wage and doesn't offer health insurance. His voice was firm but gentle. I've already spoken with my financial advisor. I'm setting up an account in your name, enough to cover living expenses, medical costs, and then some. You're going to rest, recover, and then, if you want to work, you can find something that doesn't kill you. I don't want your money, Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. It's not charity. It's what I should have been providing for the last 25 years. Alexander leaned forward. Elena, please let me do this. Let me take care of you both. I can't fix the past, but I can make sure you never have to choose between your health and your bills again. Sophie watched her mother's face, the pride wearing with practicality, the fear of accepting help battling against sheer exhaustion. Okay, Elena whispered finally. Okay. 2 weeks later, Sophie stood in front of a door in Tribeca she'd never imagined she'd enter. Alexander's penthouse. He'd invited her to dinner, just the two of them, to talk. She'd almost carnaled 3 times. The door opened before she could knock. Alexander stood there in jeans and a casual button-down, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Sophie, come in. He seemed nervous, which was oddly comforting. The penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Modern furniture that probably cost more than her old apartment. Art on the walls that Sophie vaguely recognized from her one art history class. But what caught her attention was the dining table. It wasn't set for some fancy dinner. Instead, there were photo albums spread across it, dozens of them. I wanted to show you something, Alexander said, leading her over. This is my life. The parts I wish I could have shared with you. Sophie picked up the nearest album. Photos of a younger Alexander, at graduation at his first office, shaking hands with important-looking people. As she flipped through, she noticed something. In every photo, even when he was smiling, his eyes looked empty. "I built an empire," Alexander said, quietly standing beside her. "I made billions. I had everything I thought I wanted, and I was miserable." He picked up another album, older, more worn. "This was my life before, when I was happy." Sophie gasped. The photos were of Alexander and her mother. Young, laughing, so obviously in love it hurt to look at. At the beach, at a diner in a tiny apartment. Elena and Alexander's arms, both of them grinning at the camera. "This was taken the day we got the tattoos," Alexander said, pointing to one photo. "We just aced our finals. We felt invincible. We thought nothing could ever separate us." "What happened?" Sophie asked softly. Alexander sat down heavily. "Fear. Cowardice. My father had a vision for my life. Business school, investment, banking, eventual takeover of his company. When Eleanor got pregnant, he saw it as a threat to all of that. He sat me down and painted this picture of poverty and struggle of throwing my potential away. And I believed him." His voice turned bitter. "I chose money over love. I chose a future that looked good on paper over the person who actually made me happy." "But you looked for her," Sophie said. "You said you looked not hard enough, not long enough." Alexander met her eyes. "I gave up, Sophie. I told myself she wanted nothing to do with me. I let my pride get in the way. And then I spent 25 years burying my guilt under work and money and meaningless achievements." Sophie sat down across from him. "Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who your father is. Not the billionaire. Not Alexander Hunt, the businessman, but Alex, the guy who was so scared of disappointing his father that he destroyed the best thing in his life." He paused. "And because I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did." "What do you mean, Sophie? You're brilliant. Your mother told me you had a full scholarship to NYU, that you wanted to be a teacher. You gave all that up to take care of her." Sophie looked away. "She needed me. And that's admirable. But Sophie, you're 25 years old. You should be finishing your degree, building your own life, making your own dreams come true, not sacrificing everything for survival." "Some of us don't have a choice," Sophie said, unable to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "But you do now." Alexander pulled out an envelope. "I've already paid off your mother's medical bills, all of them. I've set up an account for her living expenses. Her health insurance is covered. And this." He slid the envelope across the table. "This is for you." Sophie opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter from NYU and a check for $200,000. What is this?" Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. 4 years of tuition room and board books and living expenses. I called NYU. You can re-enroll for the spring semester. Your scholarship is still available. You can finish your degree." Sophie stared at the check, unable to process what she was seeing. "I can't accept this." "Why not? Because it's too much." "Because I don't know you." Because you're afraid," Alexander said gently. "I understand. For the last 5 years you've been in survival mode, just getting through each day. The idea of actually planning for a future, of wanting something for yourself, it feels impossible, maybe even selfish." Sophie felt tears burning in her eyes. "Is that what it felt like for you? When you gave up on finding my mum?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Alexander nodded slowly. "Yes. I told myself it was practical, that I was being realistic, that I needed to move on. But really I was just scared. Scared of facing what I'd done. Scared of being rejected," he trailed off. scared of what? Scared of feeling something real. He finished. It's easier to be empty and successful than vulnerable and uncertain. Sophie looked down at the check again. $200,000. A future, a choice. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said quietly, for abandoning my mum, for not being there for all of it. I don't expect you to, Alexander said, and I'm not trying to buy your forgiveness. This isn't about me, Sophie. It's about you. You're my daughter, and whether you want a relationship with me or not, I want you to have the opportunities I denied you by not being there. Sophie wiped her eyes. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you regret it, building your empire, becoming who you are? Alexander was quiet for a long moment. I regret how I did it. I regret what I sacrificed. But he looked around the penthouse, then back at her. Everything I built, all of this, it means nothing if I can't use it to help the people I should have been helping all along. So maybe the real question isn't whether I regret my choices. It's whether I can do something meaningful with the consequences. Sophie stood up, the check still in her hand. I need time to think about all of this, about school, about you, about everything. Of course, Alexander stood too. Take all the time you need. But Sophie, I'm not going anywhere this time. Whether you cash that check or not, whether you want me in your life or not, I'm here. I'm your father, and I'm not walking away again. Sophie nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in her throat. As she turned to leave, Alexander called out, Sophie. She looked back. Your mother raised an incredible person. Whatever happens between us, I want you to know I'm proud to be your father, even if I don't deserve to be. That night, Sophie sat on the fire escape of their apartment, the one that looked out over the city lights. Elena joined her, wrapped in a thick blanket, looking healthier than she had in months. He told you about the school money, Elena said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, Sophie held up the check. It's insane, Mom. This is insane. What are you going to do? Sophie was quiet for a long time. I don't know. Part of me wants to tear this up and tell him to take his guilt money. And Sophie. But the other part, Sophie's voice broke. The other part wants to go back to school so badly it hurts. I miss learning. I miss having dreams. I miss being 25 instead of feeling 50. Elena took her daughter's hand. Then go back. What about you? I'm going to be fine, baby. For the first time in 25 years, I'm actually going to be fine. I can rest, recover, maybe even figure out what I want to do with my life, beyond just surviving. She squeezed Sophie's hand. You don't have to sacrifice your future to take care of me anymore. But what about him? What if accepting this means? It doesn't mean anything, except that you're giving yourself a chance, Elena said firmly. Whether you build a relationship with Alexander or not, that's separate. This is about you and your education and your dreams. Sophie looked at the check again, then at the city spread out before them. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of possibilities. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll do it. Elena pulled her daughter close, both of them, looking out at the city that had almost broken them, but hadn't quite managed to. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Alexander stood at the window with his phone in his hand. He typed and deleted a dozen messages to Sophie. Finally, he settled on something simple. Whatever you decide, I'm here. Dad, he stared at the word, Dad. He'd never had a chance to be called that. Never heard it in Sophie's voice. Maybe he never would, but he'd sent the text anyway. And for the first time in 25 years, Alexander Hunt went to sleep, feeling something other than empty. He felt hope. 6 months later, Sophie walked across the NYU campus with her backpack slung over one shoulder, a coffee in her hand, and a smile on her face that felt almost foreign, after years of barely surviving. The spring semester had been brutal, trying to catch up on 2 years of missed education while adjusting to actually being a student again, instead of just a worker bee. But she'd done it. She'd survived her first semester back. More than survived. Thrived. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Dr. Reeves says, 'I'm officially in full health, clear on everything. We're celebrating tonight. Your choice of restaurant.'" Sophie grinned, typing back. "Anywhere but the Azure Room. I've had enough of fancy restaurants for a lifetime." Another buzz. This one from Alexander. "Congratulations on finishing your semester. I know you had that Victorian literature final today." "How'd it go?" Sophie paused. Over the last 6 months, she and Alexander had been carefully circling each other. Weekly coffee meetings that felt like job interviews at first. Awkward conversations where they both tried too hard. Slowly, painfully, they'd started to find a rhythm. She still didn't call him. Dad couldn't quite bring herself to, but Alexander had softened to Alex about 2 months in. "Nailed it," she typed back. "Professor said my essay on Withering Heights was one of the best she'd read in years." "Of course it was. You're brilliant." Sophie smiled despite herself. Alex had this way of being proud of her that felt genuine, not performative or guilty, just real. Mum got her test results all clear. There was a longer pause before his response. "That's incredible news. I'm so happy for her, for both of you." Sophie bit her lip, then typed, "We're celebrating tonight. You could join us if you want." The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "I'd love that. Thank you." That evening they met at a small Italian restaurant in the village, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Nothing fancy, nothing intimidating. Alexander arrived first looking nervous in jeans and a sweater, his trying to be casual outfit that Sophie had come to recognize. When Elena and Sophie walked in together, both laughing at some shared joke, he stood up so fast he almost knocked over his chair. "Elena, you look—" He stopped, seeming to search for words. "You look healthy, happy." And she did. Elena had gained back the weight she'd lost. Her hair shone with its natural auburn color again, and most importantly, her eyes sparkled with life, instead of exhaustion. "I feel like a different person," Elena said, sliding into the booth across from him. Sophie sat beside her mother, creating a gentle buffer. "It's amazing what proper medical care and not working yourself to death can do. I'm glad," Alexander said softly. "Really glad." The waiter came and took their orders. For a few minutes they made small talk, safe topics like the weather and Sophie's classes. But there was an elephant in the room, and finally Elena addressed it. "Alex, we need to talk. Really talk about everything." Alexander sat down his water glass. "Okay." Helena took a deep breath. "I've spent the last 6 months in therapy. Something I should have done years ago but couldn't afford. And I've realized something important." She looked at him steadily. "I need to apologize to you." What Alexander looked stunned. "Elena, you don't owe me. Let me finish." Elena's voice was gentle but firm. "What you did 25 years ago, pressuring me about the pregnancy, giving me money and walking away, that was wrong. You were a coward and you hurt me deeply." Alexander flinched but nodded. But Elena continued, "What I did was also wrong. I lied to you. I told you I'd miscarried when I was actually pregnant. I made a unilateral decision that affected all 3 of our lives. And I justified it by telling myself I was protecting Sophie from rejection." But really her voice wavered. "I was protecting myself. I was hurt and angry, and I wanted to punish you. So I took your daughter away before you even knew she existed." Sophie reached for her mother's hand. "I robbed Sophie of knowing her father. Elena said, tears streaming down her face. Now I robbed you of knowing your daughter, and I told myself I was doing the right thing, but I wasn't. I was just scared and angry and too proud to admit I needed help. The restaurant bustled around them, but their corner booth felt suspended in time. We were kids, Alexander said, hoarsely. 20 years old and terrified. We both made terrible decisions. But our terrible decisions hurt Sophie. Elena said, she's the one who paid the price for our mistakes. Growing up without a father, without financial security, watching me struggle and sacrifice because I was too stubborn to reach out. Sophie had tears running down her own face. Now, lamb, it's true, baby, Elena said, turning to her daughter. I thought I was being noble, doing it all on my own, but there's a difference between strength and stubbornness. I should have found a way to tell him, to give you both a chance. I wouldn't have been a good father back then, Alexander said quietly. I was too focused on building my empire, proving my worth to my father. If you'd told me, I probably would have sent money and nothing else. An absent father with a checkbook instead of a heart. Maybe Helena agreed, but you should have had the choice, and Sophie should have had the chance to know you even if it was imperfect. Alexander turned to Sophie. Your mother's right. We both failed you in different ways, and I know I've been trying to make up for it with money and opportunities, but he swallowed hard. That's not what matters, is it? What matters is whether I can actually be your father, not your benefactor. Your father. Sophie wiped her eyes. I don't know what that looks like. Neither do I, Alexander admitted. I've never been anyone's father before. I don't know if I'll be good at it. But I want to try if you'll let me. Their food arrived, creating a merciful interruption. They ate in contemplative silence for a few minutes, the weight of the conversation settling around them. Finally, Sophie spoke. I have something to say too. Both parents looked at her. I've been angry at both of you. Sophie's voice was steady, despite the tears. At you, Alex, for not being there, and at you, Mum, for not telling him, for struggling so hard when maybe it didn't have to be that way. I've spent a lot of time in my own therapy. Thank you for setting that up, by the way, working through it all. And Elena asked gently, and I realized that I can spend my whole life being angry about what didn't happen, or I can try to appreciate what is happening now. Sophie looked at Alexander. You're here. You're trying. You showed up that night at the restaurant, and you've kept showing up every week since. That matters. Alexander's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and Mum Sophie continued, turning to Eleanor. You gave me everything you had, every single day of my life. Yes, it was hard. Yes, I wish things were different sometimes, but you loved me with everything you had. And that's not nothing. That's everything. Elena pulled Sophie into a fierce hug, both of them crying openly now. So here's what I think, Sophie said, pulling back and looking at both of them. I think we're a family. A weird, complicated, broken and pieced back together family. But a family, and maybe that's enough. Alexander reached across the table, his hand hovering uncertainly. Elena looked at it, then at Sophie, then back at him. Slowly she placed her hand in his. Sophie added hers on top. A family, Alexander repeated, his voice breaking. I like the sound of that. 3 months later, the community center in the Bronx wasn't fancy. Worn linoleum floors, fluorescent lights, folding chairs arranged in neat rows, but it was packed with people, all of them buzzing with excitement. Sophie stood at the front of the room, nervous butterflies doing acrobatics in her stomach. Behind her was a banner, the Elena Carter Foundation Education and Healthcare for Struggling Families. In the front row sat her mother, healthy and glowing, next to Alexander, who couldn't stop smiling with pride. "Thank you all for coming." Sophie began, her voice stronger than she expected. 6 months ago, I was working 70 hours a week as a waitress, watching my mother slowly die because we couldn't afford health care. I thought that was just how life was for people like us, that some people got lucky and others just struggled until they couldn't anymore. She paused, making eye contact with faces in the crowd, tired mothers, struggling students, people who looked exactly like she had not so long ago. But then, something unexpected happened. I met my father for the first time in my life, and he had resources I couldn't have imagined. At first I was angry that these resources existed while we'd been suffering, angry at the unfairness of it all. Alexander shifted in his seat, but Sophie smiled at him reassuringly. But then I realized anger without action is just bitterness. So we decided to do something. My father, my mother, and we created this foundation. It provides free health care, screenings, connects families with affordable medical care, and offers educational scholarships to students who've had to choose between school and survival. The room erupted in applause. "This isn't charity," Sophie continued. "This is justice. This is saying that no mother should have to choose between medicine and rent. No student should have to give up their dreams to pay bills. No family should have to watch someone they love die because healthcare is a luxury instead of a right." More applause. Some people standing now. The Elena Carter Foundation launches today with a commitment to serve 500 families in the first year. We have partnerships with 3 hospitals, 2 universities, and dozens of community organizations. And we're just getting started. Sophie looked at her mother, who was openly crying with pride, then at Alexander, who mouthed, "I'm proud of you. My mother taught me that love is sacrifice." Sophie said, her own voice thick with emotion. "She taught me resilience, determination, and strength." "My father," she paused, the word still feeling new in her mouth. "My father taught me that wealth without purpose is empty, that resources are only meaningful if they're used to help others. Together they're teaching me that families aren't perfect, but they can still be beautiful." After the presentation, people lined up to ask questions, to share their stories, to sign up for services. Sophie worked the crowd with Eleanor by her side, both of them energized by the hope in the room. Alexander hung back, watching them work together. His daughter and the woman he'd loved and lost, and in some strange way found again. A young woman approached him. "Mr. Hunt, I just wanted to say thank you. My son has asthma and we can't afford his inhaler. Your foundation is going to help us get it. You're saving his life." Alexander felt his throat tighten. "It's not me, it's them." He gestured at Sophie and Elena. "They're the ones who understand what's needed. I'm just trying to help." "Well, thank you anyway." The woman squeezed his hand and moved on. Later, after the crowd had thinned and they were packing up, Elena approached him. "That was quite a turnout," she said. "Sophie's a natural," Alexander replied. "The way she connected with people, that's all you. That's how you raised her." Elena smiled. "She has your determination, though your drive. Once she sets her mind to something, nothing stops her." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Sophie laugh with a group of students who'd gathered around her. "Elena," Alexander said quietly, "I know we can't go back. I know too much has happened. But thank you for giving me this chance, for letting me be part of her life. Part of both your lives." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time since that night in the restaurant. "We're not kids anymore, Alex. We're not who we were 25 years ago. No, he agreed. We're not. But maybe that's okay, Helena continued. Maybe who we are now. Two people who made mistakes and hurt each other, but are trying to do better. Maybe that's enough. Is it? Alexander asked. Enough, Helena smiled. It's a start. 1 year later, Sophie stood in her cap and gown diploma in Hond, surrounded by her family. Helena, healthy and happy, working part-time as a counselor for the foundation. Alexander, who'd cut his work hours in half to spend more time actually living instead of just achieving. And surprisingly, a boyfriend. A guy from her Victorian literature class who thought it was cool that she'd worked as a waitress and didn't care about her father's money. Speech, speech, her boyfriend called out. Absolutely not. Sophie laughed, but Alexander and Helena joined in the chanting. Fine. She held up her hands and surrender. Okay, here's my speech. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I'd given up on dreams. I was just surviving day by day, watching everything I loved slowly die. Her voice turned serious. But then a tattoo, a simple tattoo, changed everything. It brought my father into my life. It saved my mother's life. And it taught me the most important lesson I've ever learned, which is her boyfriend prompted that it's never too late, Sophie said simply. It's never too late to tell the truth. Never too late to forgive. Never too late to build something beautiful from broken pieces. My parents made mistakes that hurt each other and hurt me. But they also showed me that love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up even when it's hard. It's about trying even when you're scared. It's about choosing each other over and over again, even when it would be easier to walk away. She looked at Alexander. Dad taught me that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to help others. That success is empty if you're alone at the top. Then at Helena, Mum taught me that strength isn't about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to accept help, when to be vulnerable, when to let people in. Sophie held up her diploma. This piece of paper represents more than just an education. It represents second chances. It represents a family that refused to let the past define our future. It represents hope. Alexander pulled both Sophie and Helena into a hug, the three of them forming a tight circle. I love you both, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. You're my family, my whole world. We love you too, Dad, Sophie said, and this time the word came easily. As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, the three of them stood together. A billionaire, a survivor, and the daughter who'd brought them back together. Not perfect, not uncomplicated, but theirs. And that was more than enough. 5 years later, the elementary school classroom in Harlem was bright with children's artwork and motivational posters. Sophie Carter Hunt stood at the front, a whiteboard marker in her hand, teaching a room full of fourth graders about storytelling. Remember, she told them every story has the power to change someone's life. Your story matters. Your voice matters. After school, she drove to the Foundation's main office, a beautiful building in Midtown that served thousands of families each year. Eleanor was there, as always, counseling a young mother who looked exactly like she had once looked, exhausted, scared but determined. Alexander was in his office, but not working on billion-dollar deals. He was reviewing scholarship applications, handwriting notes to students, telling them they'd been accepted, that their dreams were possible. At dinner that night, a weekly tradition, now they gathered at Eleanor's apartment. The nice one Alexander had insisted she moved to, with actual rooms and no water stains. How was your day? Alexander asked Sophie, the question he asked every week. I told them about the tattoo, Sophie said with a smile, about how one small thing can change everything. They loved it. Elena raised her glass. To tattoos, then, and the strange ways life brings us exactly what we need, exactly when we're ready for it. To family, Alexander added to second chances, Sophie finished. They clinked glasses as the city lights sparkled outside the window, a constant reminder that even in the biggest, loneliest city in the world, love could find a way. Even after 25 years, even through pain and mistakes, and almost irreparable damage, love could find a way. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that it's never too late for forgiveness, for second chances, for love, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell us, have you ever had a moment where something small changed everything? And don't forget to subscribe, because every week we bring you stories about real people, real struggles, and the extraordinary ways life can surprise us. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that broken things can be made beautiful.